On the night we married, my husband's mother stormed into our honeymoon suite, her cheeks burning with rage. The two of you will sleep in different rooms tonight, she snapped. My new husband, Daniel, simply laughed and said, Actually, I've got something better in mind. Her fury melted into shock the instant he placed a thick envelope in her hands. I was still wrapped in my wedding gown, the train pooling across the plush carpet of our suite, when the door slammed open so hard the artwork on the walls rattled. My mother-in-law marched in like she owned the space. You're sleeping apart tonight, she barked, cheeks blotchy, eyes blazing. At first, I almost laughed, certain she was joking, since it was literally our wedding night. But then I noticed how she gripped the door frame, like she meant to physically yank me away from her son, and I understood she wasn't playing around. Daniel, meanwhile, hardly flinched, as though he'd been anticipating this exact moment. Cool as ever, he answered. Actually, I've got something better in mind, then drew a thick envelope from his jacket and handed it over. Her expression collapsed instantly. She snatched it, ripped it open, and as her eyes moved across the page, her whole body went rigid. To make sense of this, you need the backstory. Daniel and I had dated for 4 years before tying the knot. I'd long known his mother, Carol, couldn't resist inserting herself into our lives. She'd appear unannounced, crash our plans, twist every situation back to her. A weekend trip meant tears about being left out. A thoughtful gift from Daniel meant complaints that she never got anything that nice. Even so, I never expected things to escalate this far. Wedding planning brought out her worst side. Nothing satisfied her. Not the venue, not my gown, not the menu. She even contacted my florist behind my back to swap out my bouquet for one of her own choosing. But Daniel stood firm every time, telling her, Mom, this wedding belongs to us, not you. She'd retreat temporarily, though I always sensed she was simply waiting for her next opening. Then the wedding arrived. Minutes before I was set to walk down the aisle, a bridesmaid rushed over, panic written across her face. Something's happened to your dress. I looked down and felt my stomach drop. Dark blotches spread across the hem, though no one had been anywhere near me with a drink or anything else. I later found out from my maid of honor that Carol had been alone with the dress for roughly 10 minutes beforehand. And that was only the start. Throughout the ceremony, she let out dramatic sighs every time we exchanged vows. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, she actually rose to her feet and announced, I really think they should slow down and reconsider this, as if 4 years together meant nothing. Daniel cut her off immediately, telling her firmly to sit, though not before she shot me a look dripping with resentment. The reception offered no relief. She hijacked attention at every opportunity, seizing the microphone during toasts to deliver an unplanned speech centered entirely on herself, griping loudly about the playlist, and eventually plopping down barefoot in the middle of the dance floor, claiming exhaustion and refusing to budge because the music was, in her words, too loud. Exhausting as it was, I told myself we were finally married and the ordeal was behind us. I couldn't have been more wrong. Back at the honeymoon suite, Daniel and I had just settled in, still riding the high of the day, champagne chilling courtesy of the hotel, finally alone together. Then the door burst open. There she stood, attempting to come between us on our wedding night. That's when Daniel produced the envelope. As Carol scanned its contents, her rage gave way to raw panic, because what she held were legal documents. Her hands shook as she read, and for the first time all night she went completely quiet. I had no clue what was inside, but I could tell it mattered enormously. Carol's mouth opened, then shut again. She looked at Daniel, fury tangled with desperation. You can't be serious, she began. But Daniel just leaned against the dresser, arms folded. I already did it. Here's the full picture. Roughly a month before our wedding, Carol had pulled one final stunt, calling Daniel's employer to claim he was planning to quit, even insisting he was emotionally unwell and needed time off, hoping that if he lost his job, he'd have no choice but to move back in with her. The plan backfired spectacularly. Daniel's boss phoned him directly, baffled, and Daniel instantly recognized his mother's fingerprints all over it. That was the breaking point. He cut her off completely, no warning given. She must have sensed she'd overstepped because the following week she called me in tears, pleading with me to get Daniel to talk to her again. I declined, and she retaliated by sabotaging our wedding, ruining my dress, and humiliating me publicly. Then she broke into our honeymoon suite to try controlling us like we were still children. But Daniel had already prepared for exactly this. Back in the hotel room, Carol clutched the papers like they scorched her fingers. This is absurd, she muttered. I stepped closer, curiosity overtaking me. Is that a restraining order? She sputtered. You can't be serious. I'm your mother. Daniel's tone stayed level and certain. And you've spent years controlling me, sabotaging my relationship, wrecking my peace. You trampled every boundary I ever set, so now the courts will enforce one for me. She spun toward me. Did you put him up to this? I shook my head. This was entirely Daniel's doing. As it turned out, after the workplace incident, he'd already consulted an attorney, compiling everything: messages, emails, unannounced visits, the sabotage at work, into a case. That was simply the final piece. A judge had approved the emergency order the day before our wedding. Carol just hadn't found out yet. I jolted upright, dread crawling up my spine. This couldn't be real. Daniel was already out of bed, throwing on a shirt, opening the door to find hotel security waiting. 2 guards stood there with the hotel manager, none of them looking pleased. Sir, we need a word with you and your wife, the manager said gravely. I grabbed a robe and rushed over, heart hammering. What's going on? The manager's eyes moved between us. Did you threaten your mother last night? I nearly laughed. What? His expression stayed serious. Your mother phoned the front desk at 3 a.m, claiming she feared for her safety, said she fled your room after you turned aggressive. Daniel's jaw tightened. Unbelievable. She's claiming I held her against her will in our own suite. My stomach dropped further when I spotted a guard holding a spare room key, ready to let themselves in if we hadn't answered. She mentioned leaving belongings behind, the manager added, and needed access to retrieve them. It hit me then Carol had tried to manipulate hotel staff into unlocking our door to frame Daniel. He rubbed his face. Let me guess, she's already gone. The manager confirmed she'd checked out at dawn. Of course she ran, Daniel muttered. Causes chaos, then disappears. He asked if she'd offered any proof. The manager admitted, uncomfortably, that she'd shown up with scratches on her arms. I jumped in immediately. She did that herself. Daniel added, or she tripped, but I never touched her. The manager raised his hands defensively, saying he wasn't accusing anyone but had to take the claim seriously. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed him the restraining order, dated the day before. The manager's face changed instantly, shock replacing concern. We checked out that afternoon, but the moment we landed back home, our phones lit up with missed calls, messages, and a voicemail from a police officer stating that Carol had filed a domestic abuse complaint against us from the hotel and requesting we come in for statements. I nearly dropped my phone. She'd actually gone to the police with fabricated claims. The hours that followed blurred together, frantic calls, gathering evidence, reaching Daniel's attorney, who had been preparing for exactly this scenario for months given Carol's history. The hotel's security footage told the real story, showing Carol entering uninvited and leaving calm and unhurried. No tears, no fear, nothing matching her account. Combined with the already active restraining order, her story fell apart fast. At the station, the lawyer presented everything clearly. The officer, while professional, clearly saw through her claims. No evidence, just theatrics. No charges were filed, though a report was logged, one that would later prove costly for her. The final straw came when we cut Carol off entirely, blocked her number, changed our locks, told our families the truth. But she had one more move. A month later, Daniel's bank called about a flagged transaction on a joint savings account, one we didn't even know still existed. Turned out that years earlier, when Daniel opened his first account in college, his mother had co-signed and never removed herself from it. Now she'd tried withdrawing $10,000, assuming it was our honeymoon savings. Daniel had completely forgotten the account existed, but Carol clearly hadn't, and this time she left undeniable proof behind. The bank flagged it as fraud, and given the false police report already on file, investigators connected the dots to a broader pattern. The clincher, she'd signed the withdrawal slip in person, leaving zero room for denial. From there, her world collapsed within weeks. The grieving, victimized mother act crumbled, replaced by the truth. A manipulator caught red-handed. Her accounts were frozen, her reputation in ruins. Relatives who once defended her stepped back. Even friends distanced themselves once they learned the full extent of what she'd done. Then came the legal fallout. When Daniel's lawyer recommended digging further, we did. And what surfaced was staggering. Years of hidden debt, a credit card fraudulently opened in Daniel's name during college, and benefits fraud, falsely claiming hardship while quietly pocketing money from relatives. The investigation uncovered it all, leaving her owing tens of thousands in penalties. The final twist came when we learned she'd lost her house, and Daniel and I genuinely celebrated, not out of spite, but because someone who'd spent years manipulating and hurting everyone around her finally had no one left to control. A year later, settled into our new home far from her chaos, a letter arrived from Carol. She'd lost everything: home, friends, savings, and begged for forgiveness, claiming she'd changed and just wanted back into our lives. Daniel read it once, then dropped it straight into the trash without comment. I smiled, knowing we hadn't won through screaming matches or confrontation, but simply by letting her unravel on her own. Better yet, we finally used that honeymoon fund she'd tried to steal and booked the trip of a lifetime with absolutely no Carol in sight. Thanks for watching. See you next time.